I'm Robin Wallace, I'm the Safety Officer for Wessex Paraglide Club. Why am I doing the talk about landing? One, because I've never used PowerPoint before, and I thought it was about time I learned how to do it. Literally, this is my first presentation ever. Also, looking at our incidents, it is landing that are causing a lot of incidents, so it's something worth considering. Particularly being safety officer, I get to look at some of the nasty details of exactly who did what, when, and why, and it was just a bit of silly decision making happens retrospectively. People know they've made a mistake, but they didn't think about it in advance. So that's why we're talking about it. That's good. So the what, why, when, where, and how of landing. So not so much how to physically land or flare, because everybody knows how to do that, but more about your state of mind, thought process, and just anticipating what's going to be happening when you land. So, trick question, everybody knows this. What is the most important flight of your life? Anybody know?
The most important what?
The most important flight of your life.
Next last one.
Yeah, well, the current.
The current.
Yeah. And the most important part of that flight is going to be the landing.
The mandatory bit.
Yeah, you've got to land. Yeah, you're coming in somehow. So, it's time to land. What is going on in your mind when you are going to land? Perhaps you're miffed that you've landed early. You didn't get your goal, you didn't get your distance. You're thinking through what went wrong. Or perhaps it went right, and you're thinking about how you're going to explain it, what it's going to look like on the lead, what your video is going to be like. You might be thinking, where's my car? How do I get really close to it? Or how am I going to get home without my car? Or really, what Brian's always thinking about, where is my next meal coming from?
I don't have to think about it, bring it with me.
Yeah. So, imagine you are piloting the space shuttle, or you're a passenger on it, and there's a captain there, and it's landing time. Now, would you expect him to be switching off all the controls and saying, has anybody seen anything good on Netflix recently? No. What I would like to see is the captain talking to mission control, talking to the co-pilot, looking at all of those things and just checking everything. Fully alert, ready to land. This landing is really important. Nothing else matters. You shouldn't be thinking about anything else. Nothing else matters other than this landing. Why is it time to land? I think quite often we just imagine that you'll just run out of space, you'll run out of height, and your feet will hit the ground, and so you carry on flying until that happens. Which is probably not a good state of mind when there's all sorts of other good reasons to land. So you might have just made your goal or achieved the task that you have set. You might have an appointment. You might have had enough. You might want to rest. You might be really tired or hungry. You might need to pee. Might be somebody coming on the radio saying, hey, we need to get out of the sky. The competition task might have been cancelled. You might be scared. You might see a pub. You might be out of land, or there's just, there's a forest in front of you, there's a sea in front of you, you're going downwind and you can't go any further. Or you might have seen Sean land. and this is a thing called, it's a bit like ground sight, it's called Sean's sight. Sean's landed and that makes sense to land. And then somebody said, well, why isn't it? Oh no, then it's. There's no other name for this other than Sean's sight, is what they're saying. This photo was at Stony Cross the other day when one, I ran out of airspace, but two, that I did know that Sean had just landed there, and it seemed like and it's a disused airfield, it's an awful lot of space, it seemed like a really good place to land. But the main one you might choose to land particularly early is because of the weather. So we're always on the lookout for the weather, but it's really crucial to anticipate the weather changing in time, so you've got enough time to land. If the clouds are getting too big, look at the clouds, go, where are they? Where are they moving? Would I like to be in those clouds? How easy is it to stay up? Is it too easy to stay up? And if it's too easy and your vario is beeping whichever way you go, you've got fizzy air, you might want to set off alarm bells for you. You might want to go up, but you might want to get down, and you might think actually it's getting quite hard to get down. How much blue sky is there? How much was there? Is it filling in? Is there less and less blue sky? There's a clue that things are changing. You might not be able to see it just by looking up. You might have to look at the ground and see how much sunshine there is or isn't. Is rain approaching? And quite often you can see rain half an hour away, but how do you know it's half an hour away? You know, if the wind's blowing at 10 miles an hour, it's 10 miles away, it doesn't mean it's an hour before it's going to rain next to you. If the cloud 10 miles away has decided to rain, the one that's forming above your head is probably making similar decisions or will very soon. So again, you don't know for sure, but you want to be alert because it can change really fast. Is the wind picking up? That you should be able to tell by your glide speed and other clues. But things like white horses down on the coast will tell you quite a lot. So at the competitions I did this summer, the organisers said we're going to have a level system in place, and you can, on your radios anytime, shout your pilot number and say level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 is I'm really happy, it's very nice. Particularly if people are sort of not sure when they're on the ground, there's a bit of ground suck going on. First couple of guys get in the air, they're going around, they don't need to do much of an explanation. They say to pilot 246, level 1. 3 people say level 1, everybody goes, okay, this is good, we get in the air. Level 2 is I'm getting rocked around, I'm a little bit unsure, I have concerns about the weather. That's a level 2. So you might say this as soon as you start to feel there's something not quite right. And the organisers will listen in, and if 5 people are saying, it's a level 2, then they might worry about which way the weather's going. The one after that is level 3, and it's very simple that you're so concerned about the conditions, you're going to land. You don't say anything else, 245, level 3. Now if one person says it's level 3, and then a couple of people come on the radio and say, level 1, level 2, level 3, then maybe one person is not having a good day, or they've hit a bad patch. If 3 or 4 people say level 3, then the organisers are going to go, okay, we need to think about cancelling this task depending on the level of the competition. You know, it's subjective, it's not the same for everyone. But even if you're not in a competition, you can still ask yourself, is this level 1, is this level 2, or is this level 3? When it's level 3, then there's no choice, you go, you land. When to decide? It's a whole load better deciding to land early rather than too late. You need to land before that decision is forced, or decide to land before the decision is forced on you, so you stay in control. So you don't leave the decision too late, you don't run on luck, you don't run on blind faith, you don't expect a thermal, you don't expect that there's going to be more wind further down the coast. And I'm talking this, you don't expect to get another 500 metres in your cross-country league just to score the extra points. There's no point. So if you get a thermal, by all means take it, but don't fly dangerously close over somewhere where you can't land. You know, forests being an obvious one around here. You know, if you can see some woods, but you don't know if you're going to get over them, you don't go over them. Because you might get a thermal, but you may well not. So give yourself time to land without rushing before the weather gets worse. But get the balance right. If you're landing because of fear, then perhaps everything's fine and you're just feeling nervous. So did you actually get a collapse? Or are you just getting pitched around by thermals that you've flown into, not taken and flown out again? So being nervous may be a good reason to land. There's no shame in that. But perhaps you're picking up something that's wrong. You don't know, you can put your finger on it, but you're just uncomfortable, you want to get up the ground. Or perhaps you go, well, maybe conditions are okay, and you can defer your decision by 5 or 10 minutes. Just say, okay, if I'm still feeling this way, in 10 minutes' time, I'm going to land. So it's still being decisive, but you're deciding to defer this because the signs are not clear to you yet. You're just on alert. So, it's now time to land. You're going to do the best landing that you can possibly do. You're going to warm up your body. If it's been sitting around rigid for a couple of hours, you're going to warm up your brain. You're going to turn on your space shuttle systems. All systems go. Deep breaths. And don't rush unless you need to. So, landing. Gather your data. Soak up all of the data points that you think are poignant. So, altitude, obviously. How much time have you got to land? And if you're low to the ground, this might not be very much time at all. So, you might have almost no time to be thinking about this. But hopefully, you've given yourself enough time to soak up lots of information. So, air conditions, strength of the wind, direction of the wind, because that changes pretty much everything about how you're going to decide to land. How is your penetration into the wind? You kind of should know this and haven't been flying in the air, but if you're not certain and you've got time, you do a 360 and just check your penetration into wind and crosswind to confirm what you think you know of how strong the wind is and which direction it's going. Looking at data from the ground, trees, moving, smoke, flags, and then of course the weather that might be changing. Is it changing in a particular direction? Is it raining ahead and you want to land and you want to avoid that? So these are all factors about which direction you're going to head to and what you're going to pick. And then looking at the terrain. Is it flat? Are there objects on it? Have you got buildings on it? Are there trees? And what are other pilots doing? Don't blindly follow another pilot just because they've chosen to land somewhere. But if you know who it is and you know what their ability's like, then take the time, watch them, see how they get on, see if there's any problems with their landing. If you've got a radio, get on the radio and ask a question. How is it on the ground? What's the wind direction doing on the EAT landing? Where is the best place to land or where's not to? So, not the most convenient place, necessarily. Not near your car, necessarily. Not so Heather and Charisse can see you. What's that they were called when I grabbed this image? Heather and Charisse are waiting for Richie. That's Richie. Not near the exit of the field, necessarily. Not in the cool place, not where the person before landed, the person before you landed, necessarily. Not in a pub garden, unless it's incredibly suitable and you're very, very skilled. More on that later. The only place to land is the safest place. It just makes sense every time to choose the safest place. So probably in the middle of the biggest, flattest spot, without any buildings, power lines, livestock, rocks, and correctly aligned with the wind. Now, you might not get all of those options, so you might have to compromise a bit. Or there might be 5 different places where it all looks perfectly reasonable. You don't need to go crazy to land in the very centre of a 100-acre field. But still, you pick your spot, which looks like as safe as anywhere else, the safest spot. And be disciplined. If you're going to land there, unless something changes. Stick with your decision. Expect to walk. So my latest plan is wherever I land is to try and give myself a 5-minute walk. Whatever. Because why not? It's only 5 minutes. We've got paragliders, they pack in a pack. That's the joy of them. So with that attitude, you're never trying to shave 2 minutes off your walk or land right next to your car or land right by the gates to get out of the field. Richie here's got walking sticks, walking poles, which again makes it a whole lot easier if you've got a 2 mile walk with a 20 kilo pack. Actually, they don't weigh very much, easy to fly with. So it would be another reason to encourage you to land not somewhere too convenient, but less convenient, but safer. And if you don't like walking, or you worry that that's a concern of walking too far, you can carry a big black bin liner in your pack. If you don't want to carry the gear very far, pack it up, leave it behind a tree, and then come back and pick it up in the car later. So, height. Clearly, if you're very low, you've got less options. So, when you're flying low, when we're doing coast runs, you should have in the back of your mind all the time, where could I land now? You've got a bayback option, and the lower you are, the more critical this is. If you've got 250 feet, you've probably got time to choose between several bayback points. But if you're flying along like this guy here at 50 feet, there's no time. You're on the ground in 2 seconds. So that bayback point needs to be in the back of your mind all the time, and as soon as you can't see anywhere else to land, you have to go for that spot. This might be your last chance. These 2 photos were taken 5 seconds apart. So top left, you can see some beach on the right. Now this pilot can get to that beach now. He can turn out to the right, swerve in, land on the sand. Even a couple of seconds later, he's still got time to do a swift 180 and land downwind. No reason why not to land downwind if he has to, if that's his last chance. He didn't turn, he kept going. So the one on the picture on the right, he's out of options. He's got the sea on the right, he's just got big slippy boulders ahead of him and a bunch of trees on the left. And now he's got about 25 feet. So he's 5 seconds from landing. It didn't go well. 5 seconds. He just didn't react fast enough, didn't have a plan. But if you're high, you may need to lose height deliberately. So you need some height loss techniques. And what have you got in your toolbox? So most people have got big ears, spiral dives. Are you any good at these things? How long can you keep them going for? When did you last practice them? Because when you need them in anger, you find out that it still takes a long time. If your big ears on its own gives you a descent rate of 2 meters a second, might do. If you're at 2,000 meters, it's going to take 100 seconds to big ears all the way to the ground. That's 16 minutes. Now, if you were trying to lose height because of changing weather or because of other circumstances, it's too long. Big ears and bar, maybe 4 meters a second. But that's still 8 minutes. It's quite a long time. So if you want to get to the ground quickly, well, you need to practice it, and also 8 minutes holding in big ears and pushing on bar is really tiring and unsettling and really rattles you around. So it's non-trivial and it's worth practicing it, but also just being ready for it when you need to do it. Don't get freaked out at the fact that your glide is flapping around because you're in big ears for so long. Other height loss techniques, anyone?
Beeline stall.
Hmm? Beeline stall, yeah. A lot of the gliders aren't rated for it these days. Right? Well, 2-liners.
I like to find a sequence and call that.
Yeah, anti-thermal. Yeah. Which is fine if you can actually find anything. Yeah.
Wrong to the gentleman areas. Use the time at the peak of your current sea.
Gentle wing overs, yeah.
To use your height efficiency.
Yeah.
Efficiently,
Yeah.
so you've worked for it, you've earned it.
Yeah.
Trade it in experience.
Yeah, wing overs get you down. There's a thing called falling leaf where you do biggies, but then do lots of weight shifting and you fall from side to side. Which sounds a bit airy-fairy, and I'm not sure how quickly it's going to work. But Theo de Blick does one where he pulls in
Spiraling.
big ear on one side and then spirals on the other side. But I found that as soon as you go quite hard into the spiral, certainly on my dive, it just wants to pop out. It doesn't want to stay in, and holding it in that line in, it's quite hard work. Anyway.
Yeah, what we did, we were doing asymmetrics to try and get auto rotations on SIB. and I found it so hard to hold the flat stay in, it would just pop out.
This is in August when Sean and I and Derek as well, Richie, flew from Swallowcliff to Stony Cross. So you can see on the picture in the middle my my track log here. On the left, I'm coming in quite high. You know, I was going from 4,000. It suddenly got very, very lifty. The clouds were beautiful, up to 4,800 feet. And then I looked and saw that the airspace, the blue bit at the bottom, was at 2,000 feet. So I had to lose, you know, more than half my height. You know, in no particular rush. But I'd left it too late to do spirals, because when you spiral, my spirals only go down at 5 metres a second, and the wind's blowing at 20 kilometres an hour, which is 5.5 metres a second. So even if I'm in a spiral dive, I think I'm getting drifted at about 45 degrees. So when I'm losing my 1,000 metres, I'm actually travelling 1,000 metres forward. So if I just spiral down, chances are I collide with airspace. Now, it probably wouldn't have mattered. I wouldn't be able to claim my flight, but you know, had that been water or something else, then I had left it too late to do my pathetic spirals out of the sky. So I had to turn into wind and do big ears and bar, and just try and get myself far enough away from the airspace so I actually could contemplate doing spirals. But after, you can see that the crest comes down from my first losing height, got down to 2,200 feet. At this stage, after 6 minutes of big ears and bar, I'm actually a bit knackered. So I had to let the ears out, give myself a rest, get on the bar and just try and penetrate a bit more. But I'm going up again. So the moment I stopped going down, I've got you can see on the graph at the bottom shows you 3 metres a second lift. So I couldn't even take a break for very long. I had to go back into spirals and big ears to get to the ground. So that whole episode took me 17 minutes. There's another one. This is in Slovenia. We were the practice task, I think, for the Navita Open, and it was a very nice day, but suddenly it just got too easy to stay up. And a couple of people called in level 3 over the radio and said, okay, this task is cancelled, we're worried about the weather, we want everyone to get to the ground as swiftly as you can. So I thought, great, I'm nowhere near anything, I can really practice my spirals here. And you can see on the graph at the bottom, really pathetic as I start going in, 1 metre a second, 2 metres a second. Over 5 minutes, I kind of got my head together to get it to 5 metres 5 metres a second. But still, that took me nearly 10 minutes initially. Going any harder than I was going, I was starting to black out. And your vision just starts coming in and you can feel yourself going, and then you kind of have to let it off. You have to regulate the spiral. So everyone's got a different tolerance. You need to find out what yours is. Set it. If you know you can do 6 or 10, then you know you've got it. But if you can't do 10, then you find out about that before you get into a situation where you need to use it.
Have you got yourself a G-shoot now?
So, well, as I was going down, and it took the full 13 minutes, this twat on an Enzo 3 in a race harness, it was Grant. He came in higher than me and started 5 minutes before I did. He just went 15 metres a second, and he was on the ground 5 minutes before I was. So he just basically overtook me going down. It was really impressive. But Grant threw this little G-shoot. And yeah, I just bought them. Because I think it'll help me. I don't know how
it's like the higher rated wings, like the C's and so on and so forth. We've got longer lines, you get more G-force.
Right.
So it's just basically...
Where'd you store it?
Because I remember like my first wing, I got like 20 meters per second out in a spiral. And like, the first spiral. It was like, yeah. Like nowadays I'm the same as you. I'm like, oh, fucking hell. Yeah.
So again, I think at the end of a very long flight, don't be so out of energy that you haven't got the energy to do 15 minutes of fighting to get to the ground, if that's what it's going to take. Right. Where? where are you going to land?
On the ground.
Yes. But somewhere where you can realistically get to. So here on the top left, there's a nice field on the horizon. I'd like to land there, but between me and it, there's a big forest. So realistically, I cannot be certain that I'm going to get over there. That would be a stupid idea. Over on the right, I might want to land at the end of one of those fields. And there's some nice green fields over there on the right, and that would be a reasonable choice. If I don't make it, I've got bomb out places beforehand. So pick a big wide open field. Public recreation fields are very good, easy to spot. Cricket, football, rugby pitches if they're not being used. Don't land on the crease of the cricket pitch. Obviously check for the things we all know about. So power lines and livestock being the big ones. And forests. A flat field is best, or something gently facing into the wind. Avoid potential sources of turbulence, like buildings and trees. So open fields, no. Livestock, particularly horses, because horses that aren't used to gliders can freak out, and that means horses in a field on their own, but also anyone out riding on a horse. We should keep an eye out for them, because that's very bad. Pigs and cows, yeah, they're quite interesting. So you won't scare them necessarily, but they'll come over and eat your gloves. So they're a bad idea. And they shit everywhere, and you're covered in that. And the owner of the livestock will also just be not happy, even if you cause no problems to the sheep. They're protected. The shepherd wants to look after the sheep.
I'll tell a story.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine up in Scotland, and he was coming into land, and there was a couple of guys leaning against the fence, and he waved at them as he came into land, and there's this field full of sheep, and before he'd even got his feet on the ground, this ram with horns ran across and leapt in the air and got him in the nuts. And these people are like, he went from hero to zero.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing Grant bottom land at Ringstead, a long way away from the cows, but the cows slowly wandered in, and then by the time he picked all of his gear up and packed it away and zipped it up and went looking for his gloves, you could see one finger sticking out of the cow's mouth. As his gloves went through. Okay, so where to land? Avoid trees, although trees probably won't kill you, whereas water and electricity and solid buildings are much more likely to. So there might be an occasion when you need to pick the lesser evil. This film might contradict everything we've been covering so far. It may or may not concern someone in this room.
It's a pub.
That is not dirty.
How not to land. We have seen way too many incidents in Wessex with people trying to top land or slope land when a bottom landing or a beach landing would have been the smart and safer option. This is often when it's getting quite windy. People often regret deciding to slope land at Bell or top land at Eep or any number of places where it's tricky to land at the top when it's windy. So it's easy, just bottom land, and if you need to think hard about it, just compare a 6-minute walk to 6 months rehab.
Flappy as well. Yeah, would be that.
It is possible to land a race glider in high winds with a bit of flapping. I think for mere mortals, bottom landing would be the better option on that days like that. Don't need to spend too long on this. I think we all learned how to land at flight school. You know, you try and do a constant approach. You work out what the wind strength and direction is, and you head into the wind, and you get your height right, so you land on the ground somewhere nice and safe. You either do a whole bunch of S-bends until you've got your height right, or you do a long, adjusted, several legs of whatever, a constant approach. If there's a windsock, remember to use it. If you can't remember how a windsock works, eat the carrot. You aim for the small end. So, prepare early, use the whole field, do gentle turns, and a final approach without any turns. Don't use brake if you don't need to. Save your brake, because the more you use on the way in, the less you'll have at the end. So if you don't use any brake, you've got a little bit more, and you'll flare a lot more. So not flappy wings, not late turns, not sudden turns. And on the coast, sometimes you won't make your landing the first time if you're trying to top land on a cliff. No rush. Do it again, repeat it. If you get the chance to have 5 attempts, and that's what it takes, then take the 5 attempts. If you don't need to rush, don't rush it. Get your legs down early, because there's no reason not to. And in fact, getting it, particularly if you fly in a pod or anyway, you know, when you get your legs down, you've got more resistance, so you'll be going slightly slower. So get them out early. Also gets the blood flowing. If you've been sitting in your harness for 3 hours, it's a really good idea to actually wiggle your legs around, get some blood flowing. You might have to run really, really fast when you land. And after 3 hours of doing nothing, it'll be a shock to the system. Or you might be doing a PLF. So are you ready for your PLF on each and every landing you ever do? Did you practice one recently? In fact, did you practice it both ways recently? Because you don't get to decide which way your PLF is going to happen necessarily. It gets forced on you. The air is often most turbulent near the ground, so it is the place you absolutely should be active flying. So this means not using lots of brake, but doing deep inputs if there's a deflation on your wing. There's not time for your wing to actually get a collapse, drop 10, 15 feet and to recover when you're 15 feet off the ground. So way, way better that you anticipate it, you active fly, and you stop the thing getting a collapse. A bit easier said than done. But with a little bit of pressure on the brakes, you can feel that if the pressure goes, your hand will go down and fill that space. But you can go as deep as you need to go. Very deep input, but let it up again. We're not talking about heavy brake input or pulling hard, just talking about keeping the glider inflated. Anyone agree? Disagree then? So let the wing fly all the way in. I think that the danger with using too much brake, particularly if it's windy and you're landing on a hill, is that you want to come in slow, and as soon as you've got some brake on, you're much closer to a spin or a stall, and it'll only take a little fluctuation in the wind, or you to let one hand off before the other, and the wing will spin round. So just letting it fly is always going to be safer than flying with lots of brake on. If there's no wind, you're going to be coming in fast. Your wing's trim speed is 38 kilometres an hour. But your direction doesn't matter if there's no wind. You can come in any direction you like, but you're going to have to be ready to run. So again, leave your brakes off so you've got 100% of the brakes to use for flare, or if you're smart enough to be able to do, what do you call it when you sort of dolphin in and swoop. Yeah. If you're clever enough to do that at the right height, you can do that. But always be ready to roll if you're coming down too fast. Rather than break your ankle, just roll it over. You've got padding on the back of your harness, so you're normally coming in forward. Rolling is the way to get that padding utilised. If it's high wind, you don't flare. because if you flare, the moment you land in high wind, you're just going to get dragged. So hands completely up, which is easy to forget when you're used to flaring whenever you're landing. Hands up. Also, somewhere like here, this is Portland. The chances are, in high wind, you come vertically down, and you might not have landed in the middle of a big open field, but in a restricted area. You've got some time to be able to get yourself out of the way of lampposts and trees or people. So leave your wing in the air, carefully ground handle it. Particularly if there's people around, ask for help. Backstop my wing. And then get it down quickly. So deep A in A's, C's, A's and C's combined, whatever it takes to completely collapse it very, very quickly. And then run and grab it. Here's how Vicky does it. Thought I'd put a video of a lovely landing on. Vicky Taylor. Isn't that nice? So the flight is not over until the wing's neutralised. So remember this when you're landing, and also when you're checking that other pilots are down safe. You might see them put their feet on the ground, but until their wing is neutralised, their flight's not over. Be ready to help other pilots, even if you don't know them, or poignantly, if you do know them and you don't like them, you still have to help them. Finally, here are the steps. When your feet hit the ground, you control your glider, you bunch it up, and you move to the edge of the field or the area. Particularly if someone else is coming in close behind you, clear the landing. Only now can you relax, stop your video, stop your vario, find out where you are, look for the nearest footpaths, drop a retrieve pin if needed, message or radio I've landed safely, if that's appropriate to your group who you're flying with, let people know you're down okay. Eat, drink, pack away, and check that you've not left anything behind for the cows to eat. If you are approached, assume that they are just interested and checking that they don't need to ring the emergency services. So be friendly. Assume that anyone coming up to you is just curious or friendly. If they are the landowner or the farmer and they're angry, you simply apologise and explain it as an emergency landing, and you'll never do it again, and you just want to know the way out, because you're not trespassing if you're trying to leave. So, in summary, land in the safest place every time. Yeah.
That's it.
I knew that would take longer than that. Should we stop for another pint, and then Colin is going to do a quick presentation about some rota?